Time. So one thing about Patty, you won't like to hear this, but I think if people are able to have sex online, sure, they're able to connect in other ways. I mean it. So because I'm a firm proponent of digital ways of connecting people, listen. There is. We'll talk. Okay, folks. So very quickly, this is however it comes across, it needs to be said. It's not only a love fest, but I tell you, for someone like myself who's had to, not that my life has been worse than other people's lives, I've had enjoyed tremendous privileges as an immigrant in Canada and being able to go through the ranks of studying and being accredited. But you need certain people to give you the support and give you a break and stuff like that. And I have to say that I have fought tooth and nail Kelly O'Brien about her calling herself a community-based researcher, and because she's like, no, I'm not, and I'm like, yes, you are. I've seen her work with people, not only with students, with people with HIV and other conditions, very closely, and the quality of her work and the quality of her care and the compassion, so that needs to be applauded, I think, from the perspective of those who originally were subjects of study, but really are people living, grateful to Kelly in the way she structures her work. So kudos to you. I mean it. So thank you for that. It not always happens. There's still a lot of exploiting, and people exploit the research subjects, and certainly you're not one of them. So then I had a conversation with a friend last night saying, oh my God, here we have to present some of the same data I've been presenting, for 2 or 3 years, because this was done between 2015 and 2016. I think on HIV-associated neurocognitive disorder, which some other friend told me these are the best conversations when I come to the conference, that really is not very useful clinically. It's more like an acronym of a series of conditions that we use to do research and to talk amongst ourselves. So that person, whom I consider an expert, talks about cognitive difficulties, and myself, I prefer to use that instead of hand. Now, I have to say that I'm no expert on anything other than providing people with learning opportunities, and I'm a community-based researcher, so my expertise is in getting and delivering too much information. This is what qualitative researchers do. We dig in respectful ways, somewhat that makes us somewhat different from journalists. And we bring out that information. So instead of just saying, oh, we have a measure of this, we tell stories and we give too much information. I think this is the value of what we do. I did not name all the persons who really made this happen. As always, as a community-based researcher, someone has to sign in, and people give me their trust to sign in as a principal investigator, but there's a team of folks who really gave their time and their energy and the talent. Most important component of this were 10 folks across the country who are our peer researchers. If I have something that I can call a career, is working with people like myself and training them and supporting their learning over time, so they're peer researchers, they really understand what they're doing and they really contribute in meaningful ways, and they really go head to head, and I've seen it, I love that tension. I've been criticized for creating tension, but I love the tension when your peer researcher comes head to head with your clinician, and your researcher says, you know what you're saying is just does not work the way you think it does. Let's have it out. It's not the most comfortable time, but this is what we do in community-based research. We develop tensions that are productive tensions. So this study is very simple. The background is that, as you've heard from the specialists, is that neurocognitive disorders and experiencing difficulties with memory, focus, attention are increasing. And the objective of this study was to describe the lived experience of living with a hand. There hasn't been a lot of that done, much to my surprise. When they invited me, I thought they wanted me to give caption to the numbers. And I thought, we're usually used in that tokenistic way as qualitative researchers, but the reality is there hasn't been a lot done. One of the few things that we find in Canada is from Steph. Where are you, Steph? Somewhere, that you did the study with a small group of women some years ago, and so there were only 2 or 3 things that we found in the literature that really were focusing on the cognitive difficulties. So, so I have to say that as a community-based researcher also, I went right into my participant observation mode, and I actually took the full battery of tests here at St. Mike's, and yeah, lo and behold, I do have the mildest form of neurocognitive disorder, which explains all the mess that I sometimes create, and all the papers that I carry around, and all the amazing people that remind me where I am and what I'm doing. Someone was telling me earlier, oh, you came and said this in a meeting, and I'm like, bless your heart. And did I say many expletives? Usually I just say things that I should not be saying. And so, you know what? This is to make a point not about myself, but about folks living with a number of things to continue to take risks. And as practitioners, as clinicians, we help them take risks as opposed to just go home, this is it, right? Just withdraw. Risk in social participation, like myself, trying to have some sort of career at a very good level, and working hand in hand with people who are like sharp as, what is the expression? Tack. Thank you. And so there you go. Thank you. I come out of my fog sometimes. I smoke too much weed, but I shouldn't say that in public. And so the methods and activities, did I just say that? You cut that off. They won't let me go into the UK again. Methods and activities. So we mixed, this was the interesting part of it, is a lot of it is methodological, because the inclusion of 10 peer researchers, and we're working very hard in Canada towards, some sort of, not standardization, but national unity in terms of working with peer researchers and with HIV in terms of payments and things like that. But there was a neuropsychological screening. The lead person on that kind of effort was Dr. Sean Rourke here from St. Michael's Hospital. And so we created, all of a sudden we had participants in qualitative study who just received a diagnosis. I've never done something like that before, and I was a bit panicky, I have to say, at the beginning, because in qualitative research we try not to touch the natural environment. All of a sudden we have people walking in, and look at Sushan, because she was amazing in helping us from Casey House and part of the team, and I hope you will continue to be part of the team of the next iteration. And so one of the most important findings that came out of it was actually out of that providing the diagnosis before and then interviewing people, is all of a sudden people had very little time, but for the first time they had to integrate a whole new identity or layer into things. Think about when you give news to someone, including cancer or other bad news or good news, there's a whole other layer that comes upon people living with a permanent or episodic condition. And so that was one of the great findings, but very different from other kinds of research. We interviewed 25 participants in 3 settings, one here at the clinic, led by Dr. Sean Rourke, one at Casey House, which is amazing. If you have the chance to visit, please visit it, with permission, obviously. And we developed all the materials, including the questions, with community members living with HIV who were properly paid for their time and talent. I'll fast forward to the results. We analyzed the interviews. We looked at them across cities so people there wouldn't be any kind of residual disclosure, because it's easy to guess, right? And we use a team-based thematic approach to analyze that, which actually was set by the wonderful Stephanie Nixon and Sarah Flicker and other folks. The DEPICT model, if you have the chance to Google the DEPICT model, you'll find a very interesting way of working with community. Not easy. None of this is easy. It's not for the faint of heart. Working with community is aggravating and annoying. and it's tremendously rewarding, and it's what we want as patients. So the peer researchers participated. They didn't collect the data as we usually just put them there to collect the data. These are intellectual folks, and so they participated as, creating the themes, but also creating the knowledge transfer and exchange products that came after. And as I said, one of the great findings is that folks, and this is a theme that is being echoing here in the various presentations. We do not talk to our healthcare providers and social services providers about everything, and we have very good reasons not to do it, which in my view creates an insincere conversation. And again, no one's demonized here. There are reasons, sometimes institutional and systematic. Some of them are stigma, some of them are racism. They're very layered of why, we say up to a part, we don't tell everybody about our polyamorous relationships because, for example, clinicians, practitioners don't know what to do with that. Isn't that kind of a phase that adolescents go through? And you're 55-year-old, how's it? So conversations about my lack of memory or forgetting the appointment are also avoided, and that was one of the great discoveries in terms of application. And the knowledge transfer and exchange, I'm a teacher by trade, so it's always the most important part for me. We have 2 manuscripts. One of them is out already and the other is in preparation, conference posters. But I'm very interested in I forgot to bring them, Kelly, is the brochures that we produce with the folks. We did all this, sticky games on with all the things that we found out, and our very peer researchers said these are the 10 tips that we have to give to practitioners, and these are the 10 tips that we have to give to people living with HIV. And one of the first ones, of course, is opening the conversation, because it's a difficult conversation, because it seems out of place, because there's so many more important things to talk about, not the least the actual agenda of the physicians. When I come to the clinical interview with my physician with a list, he is thoroughly annoyed. And so it creates a tension. And sometimes in order not to suffer through the tension, we just don't say anything, right? Because the clinician is untouchable. So I truly believe in this kind of tips that are just the beginning. They're not policy, and certainly they're not national guidelines, but you have to start somewhere. Now, it created some, I don't know if Rainier is here, but it created some spin-off research that is very important. One, and this is a very important finding, is some of you might think, well, we knew that, is that we don't know what to do with it. This was said already by a couple of colleagues. And our Rainier Liboro, and we published the paper already on that, found out across Ontario that in clinics, people might or not have diagnosis. And Andrew, I think you were part of that team as well, Andrew Eaton. And basically, yes, you can say I have hand or difficulty with cognitive difficulties, and they'll go, okay, let's talk about something else, right? Because they don't know what to do with you, and there aren't the right steps and the right tools and processes in place. So the work is here in its infancy in terms of how to apply this knowledge. And we are preparing. The other good news is thank you to Kelly again and Richard. We've connected to someone in Brighton, the UK, who has a similar clinic, and they're interested in our brochures, which is always, anything to help people that, with something concrete is really good. And we have one operating grant for community-based research and preparation. Some of you in this room will be called in my usual inimitable, sweet way, slightly coercive, that to come and work with us. And yeah, that's what it is. It's good. We're in a good place with a bad issue. Thank you.